I received a few comments like this asking about the cheese that Lafayette gives Claire in Outlander Season 7, Episode 14, so let's talk about it. As always, this will have spoilers for the books and the show, so if you are looking to avoid those, please do keep on scrolling. So in the show, we see Claire run into Lafayette in the market preparing for the dinner that she's going to host for Washington and a few of the men at Lord John's home. And this plays out a little differently in the books. In the books, Claire, young Ian, and Jamie have just arrived on an army camp site, and Claire sends Ian and Rollo to go with Jamie to find where they're going to sleep for the night, and goes off in search of food on this army camp, and she ends up running right into Lafayette. They have their pleasantries, and Claire hears Lafayette out of the long string of names that he lists off and has this excitement thrown through her that she usually has whenever she comes across someone who is a historical figure of significance. And Lafayette immediately pulls her away from the hall that they're in and says that she must go to dinner with him with Washington. Now, obviously, in the show, this dinner is in a different location, but the general premise still stands. And as they're eating the dinner together, he actually offers Claire a piece of this cheese, a Roquefort cheese, and she notes in the book that it's very fragrant and it's got like green veining through it. And they have a whole kind of internal monologue of Claire's about the cheese on the table. He being Lafayette, also tells Claire, or explains to her rather, that the cheese that he has and is offering to her is from his wife, who has an estate where the cheese was made, and he brought it over to America with him from his wife's estate. Now in the show, we have Claire being gifted some of this cheese at the end of the dinner because they had met in the marketplace, went away. He was able to collect the cheese to bring with him to the dinner and then present it to Claire. So again, a minor tweak to this storyline and the version from the books. But the key thing here is that the show is making a point for viewers to understand that Claire really loves this cheese, knows a lot about this cheese, knows the name of this cheese, because it does come up again later in the storyline. And I am assuming, since they are keying it up in this way and drawing such attention to this cheese, that they will carry out the storyline from the books. So this is purposeful, that they hammered home that Claire is in possession of this specific type of cheese. And that is because in the next episode, I imagine, if not, then the following episode, Claire is going to get injured while in the hospital tent on the battlefield. And without giving too much away, because I think I'm going to save that kind of comparison for when we actually get the episode this week, Claire is shot in the abdomen. And Jamie is actually able to see it happen from a distance. He is approaching the hospital that they have set up in a church nearby and sees Claire kind of wander away from it, and she's kind of out in the open, and then he watches her get shot and runs to her, and it's a big dramatic scene between the two of them, and she is recovering from that wound for quite some time. Now, in the aftermath of her injury, Claire is working in tandem with Denzel Hunter, because he is obviously a qualified surgeon that she has at her disposal to help her with this injury that she ends up with. As they're getting ready to perform surgery, Claire is kind of explaining to Denzel what she knows about the injury. She thinks it went through her liver, given how much blood she lost. And this is important. Denzel points out that the liver is an organ that will regenerate itself. So if she was going to get shot anywhere, they're trying to find a bright side here and say that that's probably the best place for her to get a bullet. Right before Denzel is about to perform surgery, Jamie looks out of the tent and notices that Dorothea Gray, is approaching the tent with a group of soldiers. And when she enters the tent, she says that she's glad that she got there in time, because General Lafayette was very concerned when he heard that Claire had been injured and had sent a bunch of supplies and goods with Dorothea to the tent in order to give them to Claire and to Jamie. That includes a bottle of laudanum, which obviously is going to be very important for Claire as she's about to go under surgery. And as Dottie starts listing off all of the other things that are in this little care package, for lack of a better word, he had sent jelly, and then she makes a point of saying a terrible smelling cheese, and Claire perks up at that. And she immediately asks if it's Roquefort cheese, if it's gray with green and blue veins running through it, and Dottie picks it up and shows it to her, and Claire is elated because she can now use this to her advantage because it becomes penicillin. The type of mold in the cheese can become penicillin. She tells Denzel Hunter that when he's done performing the surgery, he should pack the wound with the cheese, specifically the area of the veining in the cheese, because that is where the penicillium is located. Later on, when Claire is still recovering from the surgery, she actually gets a visit from Lord John Grey, and while he is there, Claire is asking him how his eye is doing, and he tells her, it's still a bit tender, I think it's doing better though, and then cuts himself off and says, "Do you smell French cheese in this room?" And when Jamie and John are in the same room with Claire, there is still a lot of tension between them. I know some people have been wondering about, how the show is going to kind of convey just how long this argument between Jamie and John lasts for. And it's still very present in this meeting between the two of them. And Claire actually says to both of them, knock it off, essentially. She asks if John is armed, and he says no. And she points out that if Jamie didn't break his neck the first time, he's not going to now. And they really should behave, given the nature of the visit, which is to see Claire. And it's actually this conversation where the show's kind of deviated a little bit away from this. So John says that he's come to ask a favor of Jamie, and he has said to Claire at one point that Claire had mentioned that they were acquainted with General Arnold, and Claire confirms that that's true. And John says that he and his brother Hal are asking for General Fraser, even though at this point Jamie has resigned his commission once Claire was injured, to allow them official entrance into the city of Philadelphia so that they can find, aid to help find William, because William has gone missing. So this is when we find out that William has been sent off by Captain Richardson with the purpose of being captured at some point. So again, a slight change from the books, just kind of reordering the events and when these conversations take place. So technically in the books, this conversation and Lord John's request to go off and find William takes place after the battle that will probably happen in episode 15 of the show. And during this conversation, Jamie actually brings up to John and Hal that young Ian told him that Richardson had sent William to the Great Dismal the year prior and it nearly killed him. So Jamie's well aware that William's smart enough after the Great Dismal event to not go with Richardson anywhere, but isn't surprised if he, did something stupid at the request of Richardson, potentially. At that point, Hal, the Duke of Bardlow, enters the room, and he says that, Lord John is telling him that Jamie has doubts over whether or not William might be with Captain Richardson. And Jamie says, I do have doubts. My son isn't a fool. He's not a weakling. And emphasizes the words "my son," which the show, I think, kind of did a nod to that by saying when Jamie said "our son" to Lord John earlier. And one of my favorite lines from the books is Hal kind of takes a jab at Jamie and says, you have a lot of faith in a boy that you haven't seen since he was 6 years old. And Jamie says, I know what he's made of. I shaped him until 6, and I know who shaped him afterwards, so tell me I'm wrong. And Hal kind of, shuts his mouth like, yeah, you're right. And then he asks, then where do you think he is if he's not with Richardson? And Jamie says that he probably went after the girls that he was with, which are Jane and Fanny. At the end of the conversation, Claire follows up and says, you did say you had an offer for us. What might that be? And Hal and John both say, well, clearly we're not going to be at the house in Chestnut Street, so you're more than welcome to recover there from your injuries. And Jamie says, well, the last time I accepted help from your brother, I was a prisoner, incapable of caring for my family, and that's not the case now, so no.